breach, which is, again, pretty funny. The employee records of the Central Intelligence Agency were not included in the data cache from the Office of Personnel Management, according to government officials, but that doesn't mean that the CIA was unaffected by the breach. The Washington Post says that according to unnamed current and former U.S. officials, the CIA pulled a number of officers, what they're calling them, from the U.S. Embassy in Beijing as a precautionary measure following the breach, precisely because their names would not appear in State Department personnel files believed to have been obtained by Chinese intelligence operatives. Now, it's funny because there's sort of a two-sided war going on here. On the one hand, you have people who are claiming that the Chinese government have hacked into the Office of Personnel Management. There's not really much evidence pointing towards that we have now. It could be, but we don't have evidence pointing towards that right now, at least not publicly. And then on the other hand, you have the Chinese, who we know have been hacking into government resources. I mean, we know that's been happening. So that's not really that's not really a surprise, that this would happen. But again, there has to be proof. The government can claim something all day. That doesn't make me believe it. In fact, it makes me less likely to believe it if they say that it is the case. So yeah, that goes for any government too, even the Chinese government, because believe it or not, I'm not Chinese, and I don't really have a whole lot of stake in continuing the Chinese agenda, which tends to be rather socialist, and I'm really not. So you can understand my apprehension there. So the question of how to respond to the OPM breach has raised, the question has been raised yet again during testimony by intelligence and defense officials on September the 29th before the Senate Armed Services Committee. You may note that one of the, not primary, but one of the very important people who's on that committee is Senator John McCain, who we all know is very, well, war hawkish. He and Lindsey Graham are both really buddy-buddy when it comes to we need to bomb everyone who dares disagree with the U.S. agenda. So that would be the UK, probably. That would be Russia, obviously. That would be China. There has to be some sort of warfare against the Chinese, as Lindsey Graham would say. Yeah, not a fan of those ideas, so we'll skip over that one. The question of how to respond to this breach has been raised, though. I'm sure John McCain has a very warlike scenario that he wants to put in place. The hearing on the United States cybersecurity policy and threats delved into the distinction being made by the Obama administration between electronic economic espionage and the hacking of government agencies, and why the breach of the OPM was not considered an attack, warranting a proportionate response from the U.S. No U.S. official has gone on the record to attribute the OPM breach to China, and yet people keep saying that it's China, and there's not really a whole lot of evidence pointing towards that other than just likelihood. And that doesn't really work. You can say that it's likely all day, but that doesn't mean that it is so. You see what I'm saying? So it could just as easily be someone on the inside who wants to frame China for whatever reason, because it's the obvious choice. Think about this one. This is an odd comparison, but it's a good one because I say so. Think about this one. Back when the Sony hacks happened, remember that when all those emails got leaked from Sony, from Lizard Squad, right? And everyone, for some reason, and some people actually on TV news said that this was an act of war, by the way. Ridiculous, said that this was a hack from North Korea, despite the fact that there's not a whole lot of evidence pointing towards that other than some seemingly joking statements coming from the hackers themselves. Then again, they would, of course, want to assuage criticism towards a government because that pretty much rules out any private entity. So obviously that's the best way to go about it. Lots of problems arose from that, and the government still hasn't found out who did it as far as we know. Sony Pictures is not doing too well financially. I mean, remember Fantastic Four? Yeah, that was not, well, anyway, yeah. So Sony Pictures has not been doing too well. I don't think, though, that it's because of the email hacks. I think Sony's just not making very good movies right now. But anyway. The whole Lizard Squad hack was pretty fun because I will admit that it was a lot of fun to read the emails of some of the executives and some of the directors and find out what Quentin Tarantino's email address was, which I think was like a Hotmail account or something. I was very disappointed. At least you'd think you'd have a company email. I mean, come on, man. Like, really? You work at this high level, you're a director of many major multi-million dollar earning movies, and you don't have a company email of any sort, or at least your own website. I mean, come on, like Quentin@Tarantino.com or something like that, but whatever. So the question of how to respond to the OPM breach has been raised. We don't actually know what to do because it's not like an attack that cost lives or anything, as far as we know. It's not like it's not like anyone died directly as a result of this. In fact, it's not really that a whole lot of things were compromised as a result of this. We haven't seen a whole lot of reason to be worried due to the OPM hack, other than just like, well, it's a little bit inconvenient for the government, and I'm okay with that. So the director of national intelligence, James Clapper, who always has some warlike solution, told the committee that while we don't know in terms of specifics what was taken in the OPM breach, it had potentially very serious implications. First among them, close to home, he says, for me, in terms of the intelligence community and identifying people who may be under public status. This is a gift that's going to keep on giving for years. Still, he said, as egregious as the OPM breach was, it didn't amount to an attack on national infrastructure. Rather, it would be a form of theft or espionage. We too practice cyber espionage. We're not bad at it, he says. So that's a good way of looking at it. And I'm actually very impressed with James Clapper and his analysis there. It's not an attack. It's a theft. It's not a violent attack any more than breaking and entering and taking your jewelry is. It's scary, but you weren't really in any danger as long as you weren't home. And that's sort of what happens with the OPM, where really nobody's in danger directly because of it. It's just that it's inconvenient, it's annoying, and it's costly. But again, it's not really an attack per se. So it's a complicated situation that the government's been put into. And again, I like that. So at the same hearing, of course, Senator John McCain, who's chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, for some reason, said that the U.S. is not confronting such digital attacks hard enough. But this is coming from someone who is admittedly computer illiterate. Now, again, I'll grant you that was way back in maybe 2008, 2007 that he said he was computer illiterate, but still... No, man. I mean, come on. You're computer illiterate, and yet you're not, like, you're saying that things need to be done to respond to these cyber attacks. You don't understand computers. How? Anyway, he says the problem is a lack of deterrence. The U.S. has not demonstrated to our adversaries that the consequences of continued cyber attacks against us outweigh the benefit. Our adversaries view our responses as tentative. In response to Clapper's characterization of the OPM breach, he snapped, "So it's okay for them to steal our secrets that are most important because we live in a glass house? That is astounding," says John McCain, yet again showing that he doesn't understand computers. Now, the problem with that statement is, and it would be a good statement if someone had actually broken into some house and stolen papers and we could positively identify who did it. We don't know who did this, so what kind of deterrence can there be? You can't prove who did it. At least we don't know that they can prove who did it. So let's just assume that they don't know who it is. Some people have speculated that it's China. That's a pretty good speculation. It seems likely. But again, you can't prove that. So that's sort of like capturing suspected terrorists, which just means kidnapping people in their houses and throwing them into jail for no good reason other than suspicion. That's not the legal way to do things. And it's definitely not the right way to do things. Not the right way to do things. Now, of course, Lindsey Graham and John McCain are both very big fans of that method, so we can't really expect them to understand civil liberties or personal liberties or really much of anything of importance here. But at least he would have the decency as a human being to recognize that falsely accusing someone is kind of a big deal. Oh, there's even biblical precedent for that. Thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. It's even pretty plainly stated right there in Scripture that it's not good to lie about somebody. It's not a good thing. It's a sin, in fact, to bear false witness. So if you are, in fact, knowledgeably, knowingly bearing false witness, even against something as bad as China, that's still not a good thing. It's still a sin. Despite how bad China may be, if you can't prove that China is the culprit, don't accuse China of being the culprit, because you can't prove it. That wouldn't fly in any sort of court of law, certainly not the UN or international courts or anything like that. So it seems fruitless to accuse anyone. I think we need to face facts. Our infrastructure, well, I should say government infrastructure, is grossly outdated in a lot of ways. Now, probably not at the level of, say, high-level NSA and people who work at higher levels, right? But when we're talking about the infrastructure of just the regular hiring of regular people who do regular desk jobs in government, it's not very good. The infrastructure isn't that great. Obviously, someone can just get into it, get info, and then leave without any trace, or at least anyone knowing who did it. If you can't prove who did it, that's kind of a big problem. Because as John McCain says, retaliation might actually be fitting if you can prove who did it. But it doesn't seem like that we can. So what do you do? Well, you can't do anything. Whose fault is that? Well, probably the lowest bidder's fault, or rather, it's the US's fault for hiring the lowest bidder, I guess. That's kind of the problem with a lot of government institutions, though. That includes military, too. Your equipment was built by the lowest bidder. You're not going to have the best weaponry that's available on the market because, again, lowest bidder, contractor, there's personal connections there that are going to lead to you not having potentially the best equipment that's on the market right now. As an example, firearms, the M4 might not actually be the best 223 carbine in existence. That might be the SAR-21, perhaps the FAMAS or the Tavor from IMI. We don't know. But it's probably not the M4. And yet people keep saying it's the best gun ever and, oh, no one can ever beat the M4. Except that's probably not true. So yeah, it's lowest bidder stuff. The M16 is an outdated weapon. We still use it, even though there are many successors that are potentially quite a bit better. And it's based on a system that wasn't actually really meant to be fired fully automatically anyway. But I digress. You get the point. Our infrastructure on a governmental level is generally not the highest quality because it's the cheapest thing we can get. It works, yeah, but it's the cheapest thing we can get. And that tends to be the case with network infrastructure too. Yeah, it works, but it's not the best design, and it's certainly not the best thing that we could purchase. So that's just how it is. And if you can't determine who hacked into your stuff, I should say, don't make blind accusations. Yeah, China seems likely, but blaming China already without any sort of substantiation, at least on a public level, wildly irresponsible. And again, I'm not saying that as a fan of China. I'm really not. But again, bearing false witness is kind of a big deal, kind of a problem, to say the least. Well, Google, I am a bit of a fan of Google. I might be a bit of a Google shill, you might say. Not that I'm being paid by Google to say good things about Google, because certainly I have plenty of negative things to say about Google, namely the new design of the Google logo, which is really terrible. I hate it so much, but whatever. No, really, I just like the open sourceness of Android. I like that it's based on the Linux kernel. It's something I'm familiar with already. I like the customizability of it. Okay, yeah, maybe I'm a bit of a Google shill. But there is one good thing about Google that is sometimes overlooked, and that's Google's advances in science. Google puts a lot of money towards research and design and development too. So Google, according to Extreme Tech, will be getting a major upgrade to its D-Wave brand quantum computer, which has been the source of controversy over the past several years. The company has kept a tight wraps. That's a very poorly written thing. Has kept tight wraps on just what it hopes to accomplish with quantum technology and whether it has started to accomplish that. Now we know that the computer itself will be getting significantly more powerful, and that D-Wave will maintain it with further upgrades for another 7 years. If you believe D-Wave's take on technology, this newest version is exponentially more powerful than the last. So this is a stab at quantum computing, which some argue is not actually possible. Those people are much smarter than I am, so I won't argue with them. Nevertheless, quantum computing does seem to be kind of a buzz phrase, kind of like cloud computing. Like, what is cloud computing anyway? It's just remote software, I guess. So it doesn't really mean anything technically. It's not like FTP, which is file transfer protocol. We can point at that and say, oh, that's FTP. Cloud computing, what is that? You say, oh, well, it's in the cloud. Okay, so it's on a remote server. Oh, it's in the cloud. It's just a marketing buzz phrase. It doesn't really mean anything to anyone but the people who are going to be purchasing it. It's not a technical phrase. Same goes with quantum computing, where there is a basis for quantum computing. It's very theoretical, and it doesn't really have any sort of practical basis yet. If Google can come up with a real, live, working, affordable, that's a big factor too, quantum computer, then we'll be talking. So in a quantum computer of the type that D-Wave manufactures or claims to, the computational unit is called a quantum bit or qubit. Each qubit doesn't just add to the computational power, but actually expands the search space by a factor of 2. This is the number of possibilities the computer can consider at once. For Google's current D-Wave 2, the figure came out at 512. Allowing 2 to the 512th power possibilities. This upgrade to 1,000 qubits thus allows a search of 2 to the 1,000th power possibilities. This is a whole new way of programming, a whole new way of computing. It's not anywhere close to what we do now. So it's really confusing to talk about, especially if you're like me and you're used to traditional computing, which just, to me, just makes sense. This is really confusing. So that number is higher than the total number of particles in the universe. Wow. So this computer can technically consider more particles than actually exist in the universe. Of course, that's only if you believe D-Wave's advertising copy. That's the problem. A lot of this is marketing. A lot of this can't actually, well, really hasn't been proven to the public. That's the thing. When we're talking about new computer technology, and this is brand new, we can't really point to it and say, oh yeah, this works this way and that's how it does it. I'm not a physicist, so I can't really tell you exactly how it works. And I do know physicists. I could ask them and call them up and say, hey, doctor, do you know how this is supposed to work? And he would explain it to me in the simplest terms possible, and I probably still wouldn't get it, but it's a really confusing topic. I mean, really, really confusing. So the D-Wave advertising copy is going to be not really misleading, but it's going to be using, I don't want to say lowest common denominator. It's meant for people like me who might be enthusiasts in computers but don't really understand the physics side of quantum computing. But we do understand the implications of introducing quantum computing. Anyway, it's allegedly not actually employed. Because we've kind of hit a wall, actually, with computational power. Yeah, we actually have, sort of, with silicon anyway, or I will say with x86 anyway, we've kind of hit a wall. Now, x86 is a processor architecture. It's what we're all using, unless you're using a phone, in which case you're probably using ARM, which is another architecture. x86 is really old. It dates back to the, I'm wanting to say late 70s, early 80s, with the Intel 8086, which then evolved into the 8088, which was really common in IBM PC clones. And then you had the I series, so you had i386, i486, and sometimes i686, but whatever. We're all using processors based on the x86 architecture. And that architecture has been around since the 80s, and it's kind of a Frankenstein. There is the Power series that IBM has been putting out. I'm really excited about that. But I don't think that's going to be hitting the consumer market anytime soon because, again, we're talking thousands of dollars for one of those. But anyway, I digress. This is Digital Drive here on Hot News Talk Radio. Don't worry, we're going to be talking about things that are a lot more practical here in just a few minutes, right here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. Hey, if you're hungry, go over to Delia's and get yourself some authentic Mexican food from Authentic Mexicans. It has a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, and that's over on Hickson Pike, Dayton Pike, I should say, near the Thrasher Light. So that's Delia's Authentic Mexican Food on Dayton Pike, near the Thrasher Light, that had the freshest ingredients cooked to perfection, and they actually cook their chips every day fresh. So it's really, really great stuff. Best Mexican food I've ever had over at Delia's. And it's authentic, too, over there. Delia's on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light here, Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. Check us out on TuneIn as well.
This is a mob world. This is the mob world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing about the
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Sky Aerial Services uses advanced drone technology to give you a better perspective and depth of your property and project. We offer aerial photography and video for your business, farm, home, or advertising campaigns, as well as editing services to complete the experience. Call us at 423-521-0284 and see how we can help you tell your story about your business, property, or project. We work with real estate professionals, both commercial and residential, developers, engineer inspectors, surveyors, ad agencies, auto and boat dealers, mapping services, insurance inspectors, corporate marketing, charity events, weddings, and photographers. Our consultation is free. Call 423-521-0284. That's 423-521-0284, or visit our website, skyaerialservices.com. Sky Aerial Services. The sky is our limit.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures. Get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Soddy Daisy, just north of the Bilo. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead, 622-3156.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Soddy Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Soddy Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Soddy, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of the Costa Report, every Sunday at 9 a.m. My guest this week was the former Secretary of Education, Mr. William Bennett, whose controversial new book titled America the Strong is getting ready to hit bookstores this month. Don't miss a thought-provoking one-on-one conversation with William Bennett this Sunday at 9 a.m. on the Costa Report, right here on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
Al Gore running is crazy. You're flying around in your private jet all over the world, and you want average Americans to care about the environment. Don't you think you should be doing your part as well?
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
Hi, I'm David Tulis, inviting you to make the move with me 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The David Tulis Show, featuring Nooganomics.com for Chattanooga and beyond. 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. Russia's carrying out new airstrikes inside Syria a day after its fighter jets began bombing the western part of the country. Moscow claiming it's hitting ISIS targets, but Washington concerned they're going after rebels in order to help the Syrian president.
To make a complex situation even more difficult, Fox News has now confirmed that Iranian troops have now arrived in Syria, apparently to commence ground attacks against anti-Assad Syrian rebels. This is not a surprise to American military officials.
Fox's Doug McElway. Hurricane Joaquin drenching the Bahamas as it moves across the Atlantic. Many on the eastern seaboard of the U.S. getting ready for a possible hit.
I prep every June and get all the things I need, and then if it doesn't happen, I either eat the food or give it away.
He's in Norfolk, Virginia. One person's died in heavy floodwaters in South Carolina. And first-time jobless claims for last week up slightly to 277,000. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
We need to get Netanyahu in here to do a studio appearance. That guy can talk, man. He's been on the UN, talking to the UN for like an hour and a half now. The guy's like just going on and on. I don't know what about, probably about how we need to bomb somebody or something, but he's been talking for a long time. We have a TV in here, by the way, that's always running the news just in case something happens that we want to get a visual on it. And for the last maybe 2 hours, it's been nothing but Netanyahu talking about things that I don't particularly care about. So, oh well. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're not going to talk about the Israeli partition plan here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com. This is Digital Drive, where we talk about technology, not about international, and especially not about Middle Eastern politics. unless I feel like it today, which I don't. So we're not going to do that. There is a new app out there that is causing some controversy, and rightfully so. It's kind of, how should I put this? It's kind of a pain. No. It's kind of down and dirty. No, it's kind of well, it's kind of well, I'll just tell you about it. Maybe you can draw a conclusion. People is the name of the app. That's Peeple. People lets you leave Yelp-like 1-star reviews for bad friends and dates. So it's kind of like the worst version of Tinder, which is already sort of the worst version of humanity. Tinder gives me anxiety, to be quite honest. I would never ever use Tinder because of that. I would just get terrible anxiety, and I would never check my account, and I would get alerts on it on my phone, and I would, my heart rate would spike, and I just never use the thing. So yeah, social media is not really my thing anyway. Our dystopian, not so distant future may soon include concerns about receiving Yelp-like 1-star reviews from dissatisfied dates, or just about anyone who has your phone number, according to Ars Technica. Possibly launching as soon as November, the upcoming People app, which will launch on iOS first, is essentially Yelp for human beings. That's a good way to describe it. Yelp for people. Now, the problem with this is that you can't actually, at least according to different comments I've read about it, you can't actually remove yourself, for one, from People. You can't request that you not be on People. You also cannot remove different comments about you on People. Now, I understand that, but we're talking about, I don't know if invasion of privacy is the right word, because I don't really see it as that so much as I see it as just a, well, I see it as just kind of just low, I guess. It's not like terrible, but it's kind of low, because I can't imagine the sort of person who would want to use that. You'd have to be the most vindictive person to leave a negative review about another human being on the internet for just anyone to see. Like, you write this 1-star review about some guy because he didn't buy like your lunch one time. He didn't buy my lunch and I hate him. It's just like, man, because people are mean. People are very nasty, actually. And so having people leave reviews for you on an app just opens the door for all sorts of nasty, mean things to happen. Now, I'm not saying that it should be banned or that we should get rid of it or that it should be against the law or anything like that. That's just my view on it. I'm not one of those guys who says, oh, I don't like it, thus it shouldn't exist. I'm just saying that I just don't like it. I just don't like the idea of it. But again, hey, if you want to use it, that's up to you. According to the Washington Post, I'm not going to try to guilt you into it either. Like, oh, if you use it, you must be a bad person. You must really think low of yourself. If you just, no, I mean, come on, that's just silly. According to the Washington Post, People's current system does not include an opt-out service. So long as your name is present within the database, your reviews, good, bad, or whatever, and potentially all of them ugly, will remain open to public viewing. That having been said, the creators seem conscious of the risk of abuse and have advised methods for mitigating the possibility. For example, in order to submit a review, a user will need to be over 21. Oh, if you're over 21, I mean, that just cinches it, because people who are over 21 are automatically good people, I guess. Okay, I know that's not what they're saying. They also have to have an established Facebook account and create the listing under their real name. Well, how do you determine that it's really them? Do you scan your driver's license and send them in? Because heaven knows, I've seen some fake Facebook accounts. I mean, it happens, right? I mean, it's either a joke or it's just for fun or whatever. People have fake Facebook accounts. It seems like it wouldn't be that hard to set up a fake account on this People app, but maybe I'm mistaken about that. Maybe there's some sort of authentication method that they have that's a little bit better than what I'm expecting. It appears that only positive ratings will be posted immediately, while negative comments sit in a queue for 48 hours, allowing their recipient to negotiate the absolution. That's also, I mean, that's cool, but what if I'm not on the app and I can't give you I can't come to absolution, or maybe I'm on vacation in a foreign country and I don't have cell service or anything like that. I mean, there's all sorts of different things. Additionally, the People website claims that the app will have no tolerance for profanity, bullying, health references, Okay. Disability references. Okay. Confidential information. I can see that. Mentioning other people in a rating you're not currently writing a rating for. Name calling. Degrading comments. Derogatory comments. Sexual references. Mention of confidential information. Racism. Legal references. Hateful content. And other parameters. So no fun allowed. No. It's why even bother? They're just like, leave negative reviews. But don't leave negative reviews, because if you do, well, we'll ban you. It seems like it's negative reviews for people who have no tolerance for negativity, I guess. I mean, again, I'm not an advocate for this system, but if you're going to do this system, do it right, I guess. Maybe I'm just so used to the uncensored internet where everyone is just horrible and racist and mean to each other that I'm just used to that, and I get almost offended when people aren't racist and mean to each other. I don't know. So whether people can enforce its regulations is a entirely different question, because they're going to have a heck of a lot of moderators. Even social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook have had trouble responding quickly enough to online abuse. And these are companies which have billions of dollars. Well, okay, they're operating at a loss, but they have billions of dollars supposedly at their virtual disposal. People, which calls itself a positivity app. Why have negative ratings then? Has ostensibly noble ideals. The mission is to find the good in you, but I don't get it. It even allows you to search for people within a certain rating, enabling you to surround yourself with the best of the best. This is truly dystopian. Think about it. Can you imagine? Now, I mean, again, I'm not saying that this shouldn't exist or that it should be gotten, or, it should be done away with or anything like that. I mean, I'm totally cool with you launching an app like this, but I'm just imagining a future where this becomes the cultural norm, where you meet somebody and you say, hey, before we talk, hold on, let me check your people rating. You look at your phone, you're like, oh man, you got 3.5 stars. That's below my threshold. I hope you find somebody. I could totally see that happening sometime in the near 15 years future. By the time how old will I be in 35, then everyone will just be working on this system. And oh man, of course, by the time I'm 35, I'll be too old to care. I'll probably be, I'll be living in a mansion somewhere, surrounded by my virtual friends, robots and such, kind of like J.F. Sebastian in Blade Runner. That'll be me, probably. Sans the birth defects, I hope. But anyway, I'll retroactively get birth defects. That'll be weird. So at the same time, people could also be seen as a more transparent take on existing social media. Likes, follower counts, and even MySpace's top 8 feature are all ways we calculate the value of an individual. So why shouldn't there be a service that allows us to blatantly participate in a global popularity contest? Well, because that's a crappy thing to do. That's why. No, really, think about it. What if we judged other people based solely upon how people respond to them on Twitter? I mean, heaven knows I get not so great responses on Twitter sometimes. If you want to send me not so great responses on Twitter, by the way, you can do so. Just go to twitter.com and then search for, obviously go to twitter.com and then search for Mecha Keller. That's MECHAKELLER. Or you could just search for my whole name, Russell Stroud. You'll see that Hot News Talk Radio is following me. Then you'll know that that is actually me. And then you can leave me bad reviews, I guess. I don't know. Do what you want. It's Twitter, man. You can do what you want. I don't care. So I don't know, man. It just seems really terrible. It's 2 women put it together, and I don't think they know what they're getting into. With this. Maybe they have noble ideas. I haven't seen the interview with them yet, but maybe they have noble ideas. Maybe they live in some la la land where everyone's really positive. Maybe. I would love to live in some la la land where everyone is really positive. But if that were the case, half the humor that I like wouldn't exist, because half the humor that I like is based solely on being incredibly negative to other people. So, oh well. So much for that. I mean, really, when was the last time you saw a really good comedy that was just entirely positive all the way through? I mean, even Pee-wee's Big Adventure is negative at some points. You can't escape from it because the world is kind of terrible, and that's just how it is. Oh, well. So the Librarian of Congress, who attempted to make it illegal for you to unlock your phone, has retired today. Ding dong, the witch is hung up her hat and broom, I guess. The Librarian of Congress wields a surprising amount of power over the mobile devices we use every day. Once every 3 years, the head of the U.S. Library of Congress is actually responsible for handing out exemptions to the anti-circumvention provisions of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA, which we will refer to it as here henceforth. The Librarian of Congress has thus been able to decide whether it's legal to jailbreak or unlock phones and other devices. So jailbreaking or rooting provides greater access to the underlying hardware functionality of devices like iPhones, Android phones, which lets users install software that they otherwise wouldn't be able to use. Unlocking allows a cellular device to be used with any compatible carrier network. For example, AT&T, an AT&T phone would then work on a T-Mobile phone. So that's pretty cool. I bought my phone unlocked straight from Motorola. Again, not to shill for Motorola, but that's just how it was. I bought my phone straight from Motorola unlocked, and I use it on the T-Mobile network. Okay, technically I'm using it through Ultra Mobile, but it's T-Mobile. So confusing, I know, but that's just how it is. So James Billington, who is 86 years old, by the way, has been the Librarian of Congress since he was appointed by President Ronald Reagan all the way back in 1987. I guess they just sort of forgot about him. Like, who should be the Librarian of Congress? James Billington. All right. And then 20 years later, man, whatever happened to the Librarian of Congress? Oh, you mean James Billington? Oh, man, I forgot about him. I don't know. He's probably writing some laws about phones or something. And then we had the DMCA. Deputy Librarian David Mao will fill the role temporarily until a new librarian is nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. So wait a minute. We've gone from, how many presidents have been in between Reagan? So we've got Reagan. Okay, that's one. Then you had, after Reagan was Bush 1, Bush 1, Attack of the Bush. And then you had Clinton. And then you had G.W. Bush. And then you have Obama. So that's 5 presidents this guy's been Librarian of Congress for. 5 presidents. That's a long time. That's longer than I've been alive this guy's been in office. Actually, that's true for most people in Congress. But in the past few years, Billington has drawn the ire of consumer advocates and technology users by making it illegal to unlock your cell phone and illegal to jailbreak tablet computers. Separately, carriers have all agreed to unlock phones for consumers who pay off their contracts or installment plans, but the lack of DMCA exemption meant that consumers were not allowed to unlock the phones on their own. So even if you own your phone, which you probably do, you can't do everything you want to it. It's your phone, but you couldn't have unlocked it. Yeah, that's kind of shady, actually, when you think about it. And again, it's not even that the cell carriers were necessarily advocating for this as much as it was just it happened. So a new batch of exemptions illustrate the fundamentally arbitrary nature of the DMCA's exemption process, Ars Technica wrote after the last exemptions were handed out back in 2012. But I would say that the DMCA itself is kind of arbitrary and useless. It's the product of people who don't understand computers, who are really old and are used to dealing with books and such, things that we don't really use anymore, like books and such, who don't understand computers. Again, you have somebody who is on the different national security boards who doesn't understand computers. And we keep having that, where we keep having people who are really kind of out of date. And it's like, what are they doing passing any law at all about technology that they don't even come close to understanding? Like, for instance, I really don't know how quantum mechanics works. I really don't. I'm not smart about physics or quantum mechanics or anything like that. I'm pretty okay at predicting how grenades are going to bounce off of walls in Counter-Strike Source. That's the extent of my physics knowledge, basically. I know that you can't have a perpetual motion machine. That's pretty good, I think. That's better than a lot of people on YouTube who for some reason think that you can build one, but whatever. I know that that's not possible. So that's pushing the limits of my knowledge of physics. That being the case, I'm not anywhere close to qualified to pass a law about anything regarding physics. I'm just not. I'm not qualified. So in that same vein, people who don't understand how computers work, even on a fundamental level, are really not qualified to pass laws about computers or internet technology or information technology, IT, or any of that. These guys just aren't qualified, and yet there they are passing laws about computers. Okay, let's give possibly a more practical example. You have somebody like, say, a Dianne Feinstein, who doesn't actually understand guns very well on a mechanical level and how they work. And yet she's a really big anti-gun advocate. That's kind of weird. Now, full disclosure, I really like guns. I just like them. They're fun. They're a nice hobby. They teach you different things about mechanical engineering. There's a lot of history in firearms too. You can learn a lot about world history just by looking at the history of firearms. It's true. Like, think about the circumstances under which the AK-47 was designed, and you learn a lot about the desperation of the economy of the Soviet Union in post-war Russia. You learn a lot from different weapons. Look at the Mosin Nagant, the elegant design and yet the very utilitarian design, designed in obviously Imperial Russia. It's a very fun gun. Okay, look at the early automatic handguns that Browning designed. Very cool guns. John Moses Browning, very interesting guns. It's indicative of that time period, though. You can learn a lot from firearms, but enough about that. Then you have somebody like Dianne Feinstein who comes along after the attempted Reagan assassination and the crippling of James Brady, and the Brady Foundation is formed, Brady campaign, I should say, is formed, and you have people who actually don't really understand how firearms work, trying to push legislation about firearms. Oh, but you don't understand how these things work, so how are you going to write laws about them? How does that work? It's like people who say, well, nobody should ever own a machine gun, not knowing that machine guns are actually not that great for mass casualty because you run out of ammo really quickly. It's not actually very accurate when you're firing in fully automatic mode. If I had the option between a fully automatic gun, a fun gun, and a semi-automatic gun, I would actually choose a semi. That's just me. But anyway, you get the idea. In fact, you have a lot of people who think that AR-15, the AR in AR-15 stands for assault rifle, where in actuality it stands for Armalite, the company that designed it. It's a stoner design. But anyway, Eugene Stoner is the name of the gun. I call them stoner guns because I think it's funny. But you get the idea, though. People who are totally unqualified to pass laws, passing laws about things that they really just don't understand. And some of the times you have people passing laws that they've never actually read. They just sit there and sign off until somebody raises a stink about some bill and they say, I'm fundamentally opposed to this bill because some lobbying group says that I should be fundamentally opposed to this bill. It's a moral imperative that I'm opposed to this bill. And then they go and sit and get tons of money from donors. And they come back the next day and sign off. Oh, wait, this one, I'm fundamentally opposed to this bill because it's a moral imperative that I'm opposed to this bill. This lobbying group has raised awareness about this bill and I'm fundamentally opposed to this bill. Next day, sign off. That's just how it works in Congress. It's kind of broken. You got a bunch of old guys who don't know how the modern world works, hence my ending song being Modern World by The Jam. Bunch of old people who don't understand how the modern world works, hoping to pass laws that are really working against young people who understand how the modern world works. Very frustrating situation. And it's really kind of time for that to come to an end. How? Well, these guys are so antiquated that they'll eventually they'll force themselves into obsolescence and sort of fade away. They'll become legacy software, you might say. They'll become deprecated and no one will care about them anymore. And that day is coming. So we just have to wait a little bit and they'll go away. And actually, more likely, they'll die of heart attack or diabetes or something before that happens anyway. So, oh well. So chip and pin. That sounds like some sort of posh British dish, but it's actually not. Chip and pin is a system. Oh, I say, would you like a chip and pin? No, chip and pin is a system of authentication for namely credit cards in this particular case, specifically credit cards in this particular case, as opposed to magnetic stripe and signature, which is another way of authentication. So right now, when you buy something with your credit card, chances are anyway, there are chip and pin systems out there, but right now, chances are you swipe your card, and they say, sign here, sir. And you sign there, and you get your chips, and you walk out. That's just how it is. Or you bought your gallon of gas. I don't know why you buy just 1 gallon of gas. Maybe you're driving a moped, and you walk out. So way back in 2012, MasterCard and Visa agreed that by October the 1st of 2015, which is today, every retailer in the United States would have to have new terminals which would accept chip and pin cards, kind of like those that are found in most of Europe, as well as Australia, Brazil, and a variety of other countries, mostly in Europe, though. Those countries ditched magnetic stripe cards like the ones that the U.S. uses primarily today, more than a decade ago to mitigate credit card fraud. So over 10 years ago, which is over half of my life ago, most countries in Europe and Australia, well, Australia is itself a continent and a country, but you get the idea, ditched the whole magnetic stripe and signature system that we use today in favor of a much more secure system. So why haven't we? Oddly enough, the U.S. is actually kind of slow to change on technologies like this one. Kind of weird. So October the 1st, 2015 is today, and the changeover to chip cards in the U.S. is, as they say at ours, patchwork at best. Over the last 10 years, comparatively lower levels of credit card fraud in this country dampened any momentum that an upgrade had. If banks weren't losing money hand over fist, it would be easier not to have to re-educate customers on how to use a credit card. So even on the due date for the upgrade to the so-called EMV standard, which is named for EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa, by the way, the card networks, those are the card networks that developed the standard about a year ago, or about a decade ago, I should say, that logic still remains. It's been estimated that only 40% of cardholders in the U.S. have EMV-compliant credit cards, so less than half. That's a pretty good number, actually, but not as good as it should be. For as far as adoption rates go, 40% isn't terrible if we're on an exponential growth, but we're not. So similar numbers apply to merchants. The Strawhecker Group, which is, I thought was a parody, but it's not. It's a management consulting company, surveyed large payment service providers that collectively work with more than a quarter of the merchants in the United States. It found in early September that only 27% of those merchants had a plan in place to allow them to process EMV-based transactions as of today. A similar survey from Randstad Technologies recently found that 58% of merchants are on their way to be able to accept EMV-based transactions, but the other 42% either had no plans to make the deadline or weren't even aware that there was a deadline. So, problem, to say the least. So what we have now is about 60% of point of sale systems being grossly outdated and grossly, insecure. Yeah, kind of a problem. So what do? Well, I guess we as consumers could pressure different merchants into using chip and PIN cards, perhaps some awareness on different social media showing the insecurity of magnetic stripe cards would be in order. Maybe, anyway. For some reason, people here in the States as well, because these EMV cards use RFID chips, are going to be averse to the idea of RFID because, end times and the 666 or something like that. I thought the blood moon already happened, so I thought that was supposed to have already happened, but I don't know. I'm a premillennial, so this stuff doesn't really apply to me. Anyway, this is Digital Drive. Hopefully, we can shift over to EMV, hopefully without the help of the government, too. Up next is Clutch with Keon Rose right here at Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and Hot News Talk Radio. Don't forget to watch them on the Hot News Cam, only on YouTube. Just search for Hot News Talk Radio right here, Hot News Talk Radio, and search for us on TuneIn as well on your smartphone.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world.